Welcome to the Lawless Astrology channel. My name is Dabney, and today I'm super excited to welcome back Frederick Woodruff. And Frederick joined us a few months ago, a couple months ago, several weeks ago. I've lost track of time because we are in a weird time warp right now that
That's
we'll
putting it mildly. Yeah.
like no one knows really what's going on. But I really want you to check out frederickwoodruff.com, where you can sign up for Frederick's Substack newsletter. And not only does he have a newsletter on Substack, but he also has some really incredible video content. So he is not yet on YouTube. We are talking about how we're going to get him on YouTube, but that might be a long process. And he just did an amazing conversation with another astrologer, Jessica Murray, who's been around
Mhm.
for a while, and she's brilliant. And they were talking about Saturn and Neptune. And I was like, oh my goodness, I need to have Frederick on to talk about Saturn and Neptune as well. So you can check out their conversation, but obviously stick around because right now we are going to talk about the Saturn Neptune conjunction, just the energy of this Saturn Neptune wildness. And we're just going to sort of bring in a lot of kind of historical references, but also kind of just riff on how we're all going to get through this. So,
Sounds
welcome.
good.
Welcome, Frederick.
Thanks, Dabney. It's fun to be back here. As you know, the last time I was on, we went into quite a odyssey with the tarot and versus Aleister Crowley versus the cat tarot, which was
I
fun.
tried to get Frederick to bring his tarot back on, but he's actually like a real tarot person versus me who just like plays with the cards. And so I cannot disrespect Aleister Crowley and your tarot, but you are going to have to do a spread on Neptune and Saturn. And then,
I will, and then
okay,
I'll come on and do look at that ingress for sure.
okay. That's wonderful. How did you get into tarot?
I started when I was a teenager. I think, it was through the hippie movement, counterculture explosion in the 70s. And my mom had this crazy, back in the day, those Book of the Month clubs that were out.
Uh-huh.
And somehow Book of the Month got into like the occult Book of the Month club, which was wild. Anyway, long story short, this Eden Gray Tarot book came in and my mom was like, "Oh, I don't want this." So anyway, I took it and then got obsessed, with the cards and
It's just
just
all meant to
took it
be. Was
from
that
there.
an intro to astrology for you, or were you already interested in astrology?
It was all happening at the same time, pretty much.
Yeah, I think
Just
my
something
mom,
popped up like that in my head, like, wow, this is a whole other vector of life that, to a kid in high school, that they're not teaching that there. So, you know, I just
it's
went off
funny.
on that path. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think my mom had Linda Goodman's love signs, like which every, mom had in my
Of
generation.
course.
And but that book, like I think that book is very seminal and it has its place, but it is a very, sun sign, right? Like it's very different than what we do.
It is. And yet there's something, speaking of Aries, which Linda Goodman was, she did have some kind of secret formula going on with I mean, love signs came after the sun signs book by I don't know about like 12 years
Probably, I
or
mean, I
so.
was really little, so
Right.
I was born in 74, so
Right. But that book did actually start the whole renaissance of astrology again. I
yeah.
mean, it was already going on with the hippie movement starting and Hair came out, the musical. But then Linda's book just set the whole tenor for everything that we're still riding off of now.
Yeah.
Because Liz Green came and then Dane Rudger and all, but Linda really started that whole scene. Pretty
Yeah.
amazing woman.
Yeah, no, I don't know much about her. So I just remember that book was kind of omnipresent. And I remember
Hmm.
my first like asking my mom, like, what does that mean? And then her explaining, a few things. My mom was never really into like esoteric stuff. So
Well, how did she end up having Linda's book?
probably
Just
a
because
book of
it
the
was
month club.
Yeah, right. See? Exactly. It's
I
great.
guarantee it was just like somebody sent it to her or something like that. I don't remember her ever reading it or anything, but I was like very fascinated. And my big entry, again, we will talk about astrology in a minute, but Frederick and I have to catch up. But my big entry was the Star Scrolls. Do you remember
Oh,
those?
in the supermarket, the little in a plastic tube.
Yeah.
Oh God, those were great.
I know
Whoever
I
had
loved it, and
that.
they would chart your day, like the month, and so I would save up every month to buy those in like the sixth grade. So
Oh, what was it that was what was captivating you about the first encounters with astrology? Like, do you remember? Like, was it about thinking you could figure people out or life out or
yeah,
just
probably. I mean, I'm pretty sure that I've been an astrologer in a past life because it all, so I feel like I was just naturally drawn to it. But I think
Mhm,
there is something about, my North Node's in the 12th house and Sagittarius. I think there's just something about when something's put in front of you in some way, when you encounter something that will have an energetic pull because it's where you're supposed to be going. That's kind
mhm,
of how I feel. So I don't know what the energetic pull was really. I don't have any sort of intellectualized. In sixth grade, I wanted to, it was probably like, will this boy like me? I mean, I don't know. Like, it probably
mhm.
wasn't that intellectual. But
Got it.
yeah. So, well, that's very cool. Okay. So Neptune has officially moved into Aries.
Hmm.
So shit's getting real,
It
starting to
is.
solidify a little bit, which is it's a good thing, I think. I think there's, I'm going to look at there is obviously always challenges, but I felt like there was a big energy renewal for a lot of people
Mm.
when Neptune moved into Aries. What has been your initial take on Neptune moving into Aries?
I think maybe because Saturn's angular in my chart and it's such a defining part of my character, I think. Uh, I'm really sensing like the other shoe ready to drop when Saturn gets into
Yeah.
Aries. Is it June or July?
I think it's Saturn goes into Aries, I think May 30th,
Oh my God. Wow.
at the end of May.
So,
Coming up.
yeah, it's like Neptune's in there kind of floating around and starting its little dissolving mechanism. And then I think Saturn getting in there, then we'll have the kind of clarity that I'm sensing coming in. Like in that talk I did with Jessica, mentioned that 0 degrees Aries point as this it's kind of like a knife sharpening moment. So whatever the dullness has been with Saturn, Neptune in Pisces, that amorphia, suddenly this quickening and sharpening happens, hitting that 0 degrees point of Aries, which of course is going to be where they perfect in their conjunction next year, right? So we'll get these little like clues and front runners of it, which of course are already in the culture now, I think, that we're starting to see, not just related to MAGA version 2.0, but just globally, of course, because the United States isn't the only country having the transit.
No, it's really interesting. Because I actually braved the full 7 hours of the astrology podcast doing a retrospective on Saturn and Neptune.
Are you talking about Chris and
Yeah, Nick
did he
Dig.
have Nick Dig and Best on? Oh,
Yes, and
those
God bless
two.
them. I mean, incredible, so they do have a team of people helping to research things, and they've got their act together. But what was interesting to me, like certain things pop out to me, and so I guess a lot of the people that watch my channel are not astrology nerds in general. Like some
Mhm,
people are, but they're not necessarily people who will sit down and watch a 7 hour podcast or like understand the nuances and the best things about astrology. So speaking of which, I keep forgetting I have a new course, a beginner course. I have to promote that. Yes, you guys sign up for my beginner course. I'm going to put the information below because I do talk to non-astrologers and I help make it easy. Okay, enough of the ad. So sorry, back to what I was saying was Let's talk about, first of all, what is Neptune? And a lot of people do already know this, but if you don't, Neptune dissolves things. Neptune is illusion. Neptune is spirituality. It's image. It's what we kind of aspire towards. It's what seems glamorous to us, but it can also be what, like, where we can't see clearly. And it's been in Pisces since 2011. And so it just moved into Aries, which is going to be a completely different energy. And what Frederick was just saying, and this is what we're going, the heart of what we're going to talk about, is at the end of May, Saturn will be moving into Aries as well. And Saturn is much more about structure and discipline and paying the piper, but it can also be about fears. It can be about hardship, right? So there's, I always describe Saturn as like a professor that is giving you so much homework that you just can't stand that professor or that teacher, but that's where you learn the greatest lessons in the class. And so that's how I try to approach Saturn. Like, a lot of times when people have a Saturn transit coming up, they get really nervous, but it really just means you have to put your nose to the grindstone and like accept what's happening and get to work. So these two are going to be making what's called a conjunction, where they are going to be coming together. It's a near conjunction. It's not exact, but then it will be exact in 2026. But this spring, it's going to be at that 0 degrees Aries for that Saturn. And I think Neptune's going to be at like 2 degrees or something. I can't remember exactly,
They're
but
very almost conjunct, but just
right.
hovering in there. Yeah, right.
Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to set the stage. So Saturn's still in Pisces, but it's finishing up. And we have had a tremendous amount of turmoil in the world. Obviously, in the past 3 months, things are not what people thought they would be, right? So say a little bit about what you think is happening as far as Neptune being in Aries, but Saturn still being in Pisces.
Well, it's such a wild alchemical mix because those two planets astrologically have, as you mentioned, such different functions. Um, I think the missing ingredient here in trying to define what might be coming up is looking at Aries as an organic function in life. And that function is to strike out as an individual that has split away from, say, the crowd or the mass consciousness or the collective consciousness that we associate with Pisces, right? So the pressure is on for each of us to understand what a true individual is. That's how I see it. And as murky as Neptune is, its function is to really help distinguish between what is real, what is a true individual striking out on a new path, which would be Aries, versus what are these sort of culturally given ideas about individuality that we see, in Hollywood, in pop culture, things that celebrityhood, our the US in particular's obsession with celebrities. That's a good distinction between this is a manufactured identity, celebrity, versus an authentic, self galvanizing expression of who someone is. So Neptune makes us, I think, look at the difference between those two. And are we just aping, someone that we saw on Instagram and wanting to be like her? Or are we in touch with our authentic originality and creativity? So that's one part of the equation. Then Saturn there, like you're saying, the pressure's on to not just be thinking and dreaming about this process of individuating, but doing the work that it takes, which for all of us, we have different things that prevent us from being our authentic self. And Saturn will, put the pressure on to kind of push that up to the surface and then allow Neptune to kind of dissolve it out, because there's a healing function to Neptune. That is why I think it's associated often with people that have healing abilities, especially psychic kind of abilities, that a shrink could use Neptune to a really good advantage by being able to sense where a person needs to let go and help them dissolve that complex or structure. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I that's what I love of talking about astrology with different astrologers who come from different backgrounds, because I don't ever use the words authentication or individuation for Aries. But I
Hmm.
absolutely see that, right? Like the words that I use is, finding courage and pushing forward, your willpower, your will. But all of these things are all tied together. It takes a tremendous amount of courage to be authentic.
It does. And I always tell my students, like, think about, well, because we're talking about Aries, which is a cardinal sign, which means like Libra and Cancer and Capricorn, it's tied to the most significant seasonal shifts that we go through, right? When we leave winter and then suddenly we're into spring, that's pretty dramatic. Or if you're in Australia, if you're leaving this hot, hot summer and then suddenly you're into the spookiness of the autumn, these are dramatic shifts. And I mean, Aries is a very dramatic sign. If you know Aries people, I mean, they're colorful, they're kind of in your face because they're about that alignment with that seasonal shift, right?
Yeah, there's
So,
something incredibly bold about it. And I like I think that's really an interesting way to look at it, especially in the context of this kind of end stage capitalism that we are
mm,
clearly in the midst of, with the current zeitgeist of Frederick's work. He talks a lot about pop culture and politics and just really the culture in general on his Substack. And right now, I work in PR, and lots of luck telling any kind of story that doesn't revolve around, he who shall not be named, or, the economy falling apart and tariffs, right? Like,
yeah.
so, it's one of these things where we all I think that for the past couple years, and I think maybe you touched on this with Jessica, it's hard for people like you and I think a lot of the people that follow my channel, to understand how this happened. Like, how did anybody believe that this was, like, they said what they were going to do and now they're doing it? And now people are shocked or upset or trying to figure out, how this is going to be okay. When many of us were like running around with our hair on fire, like, that won't be okay. Let's not do that. let's
Right. Well, okay, so my mom's rule is going to get broken about never never discuss sex or politics with people. But I think I think it's important to look at something that's been a long time coming. We didn't just suddenly wake up into MAGA, right? I mean, you could say, oh, well, there was the Tea Party as a front runner, or, there's always these kind of fringe side things that usually the weight of traditional politics and the partisan system gets that thrown out. Like Tea Party became marginalized, right? And I don't know what you'd say came before that. I'm sure there were front runners, but somehow with MAGA, it was able to get real traction. It really grabbed people. And I think the reason is that it, as nuts as it is, it felt authentic to people. It felt like, wow, we've had all these fucking politicians for years spouting all of their bromides and cliches and stuff. Trump appears and he just starts spewing, and people loved it. And I mean, that's a very simplistic way of explaining it, but I think that's the charm of it. People felt like, wow, we're finally in to something real. No more bullshit from the Democrats or from the Republicans or the political speak, the jargon, you know.
Yeah, and I feel like that the Democrats are having a bit of that moment right now where it's like no one wants to hear the political jargon from you either. Like, and that's why Bernie and AOC are emerging as, leaders and going out, and they're doing the sort of tours that he used to do, right?
Mhm.
So okay, so now Neptune is in Aries, Saturn's going to move into Aries. When I was watching the astrology podcast, there were a couple themes that came up that I thought were really very good at explaining this energy throughout history. So they went back like hundreds of years, right? But what I thought was interesting was they identified that borders dissolve. So Saturn being borders and limitations, combining it with Neptune, there's a theme around borders dissolving around the world in different times in history, different places. Empires falling. Okay, so Saturn being like the empire, the one that like is tough and strong, and like merging with Saturn, it like dissolve, or with Neptune, dissolving of
Mhm.
empires. So like the
Mhm.
Berlin Wall fell during a Saturn Neptune. Um, but there was also like a rise of culture and arts in new ways, and ballet was a constant theme. And I loved that because of the beauty of ballet, but the discipline and the structure. So,
Mhm.
kind of like how, like that's sort of like almost like a positive outcome, right? But no matter what, when you have Saturn and Neptune, something's going to change. The structures, the old paradigm of like what you're used to is going to dissolve in some way, or the beauty and the things that Neptune represents are going to become solidified by Saturn.
Mhm.
What were some of the things that have come to your mind to sort of help people understand this energy?
Well, see, I'm kind of an outlier astrologer. I certainly understand the allure of, going back in time and looking to, oh, here's when, Neptune was in Aries like 150 years ago or whatever, and this is what's happening. And I think it's interesting to do that, but it also sort of it simplifies astrology too much
Okay.
because, well, think about it. Yes, 100 and so years ago, when there was a conjunction or Neptune was in Aries, there all the other planets were elsewhere,
Right.
right? So it's hard to just sort of like tease like this one fragment out of the whole pie and then try to build up like a story about, well, we're heading into that now because that happened before, right? I think it's helpful if you can, with that idea of visiting the past, looking at a transit, and then bringing it to the table to see if, rather than things repeating in the same way, to try to see what the underlining theme is that might be applicable to any time in any of the cycles. So that means, like, say, with Saturn, Neptune, like trying to take it down to like the component key molecular parts of that transit. And I think, and again, you have to place it in the sign that it's happening in, right? Um, so looking at it in Aries, it's something to do with, again, individuality, and I guess you could say martial themes, militaristic themes that are there, and then how Martian force gets remade into bringing forth some new kind of visionary Neptune Saturn structure. So it's like some kind of vision is trying to like get a foothold, and then at its highest level of operation it's trying to inspire and galvanize and excite, which is what Aries does in my line of thinking. So, I think some gross examples of like looking at, historically looking at Saturn and Neptune, uh, or just say Neptune and Aries. You had like the start of like the Ku Klux Klan was something that took off there, which has kind of a militaristic edge to it. The Salvation Army, again, there's a military take. So you've got Salvation, Neptune,
In
and
the
then
army, that is
Army.
so literal. It's
It,
fascinating.
it
I
is.
didn't know that example. That's amazing.
And then I thought one of the weirdest ones was also the start of the Jehovah's Witness, which also has kind of that weird martial edge to it. If you've ever known Jehovah's Witness people, they're very like, that's the only way I could describe it, having had a boyfriend who was a Jehovah's Witness, which was crazy. Um, but
It's an
so
experience.
what?
That's an experience.
It was. I'm still processing it years later.
Seeing the astrology play out this week with Neptune and Aries. Aries, Americans really are very financially focused, clearly.
We're a Cancer nation. Yeah.
Yeah, we're all about the bucks and the Benjamins. And so people that's the thing that people are being deported, there's like journalists being threatened, like there's all these like horrible things going on, but like what everyone's focused on is their money, right?
Mhm.
And it's interesting with Neptune and Aries because there is that sort of American exceptionalism. Aries, thinks they're pretty darn special. Now, all you Aries, I am not talking about you. I'm talking about the shadow of Aries, and I'm talking about very collective. What I'm putting together. And here's Neptune and Aries, and it was like, you're not who you think you are. Like,
Mm.
China like came back at us with, they were like, all right, we're just going to stop showing your movies in our country. All right, we're going to, like, we're not going to bend the knee the way you think we are. And
I just called a printer today because of a job and that was to be printed in China. And the printer said, we're spiraling. There's 145% increase in cost on your book. And I was like, so I had to completely, disengage from that inquiry with it. So China is not a nation to fuck around with,
that's something my husband, he said, like, they're gonna, like, you think that they're gonna blink before us? That just absolutely shows that you do not understand that culture
They,
and
it's
what
true.
they've been through, and like that, right? Like their historical, like we are a nation of like, okay, yeah, you're gonna take my fancy whatever. Okay, I'll do whatever. You know what I mean? Like it
They
is.
probably own part of my mortgage on my house.
Well, so
They're
that was the
so
thing that they started calling bonds. I guess that's why
exactly.
he so, but isn't that so like the Neptune and Aries lesson of just like, kind of dissolving this exceptionalism, like
Hmm.
you're not going to be what you think you are. And now Saturn's going to come in, right?
That's why I was saying I'm really
Let's talk
waiting.
about that.
Well, I'm just because, well, that's like the adult comes in and like says, okay, this is, oh, now I see what you kids have been doing in here, since Neptune got into Aries recently. And now Saturn comes in. It's like, whoa, what the fuck's happening? Like, and then that's when the alchemy steps up between those two. Then we're going to really start to feel what's happening and get front runners or intimations of like, how to best orient for this. And I love the example of ballet as an outcome, an artistic creative expression, because that's that's what I'm telling my clients, focus on, first of all, minimize, and no offense to MAGAites listening to this, but you know,
Please just go to another channel if you're
well, I don't know. I have clients that are, Trump voters, but anyway, minimize what Trump as a showman really enjoys doing, which is pumping chaos. His son Uranus, right? Chaos generator, keep it going, spinning. The tariffs are on. Now they're off. Oh my God, I made $1 billion. Oh, they're back on now. Oh, China, we're doubling it. You will lose all of your footing as a creative being. And you to do creative work, I don't care if it's gardening, writing a book, doing a new recipe, you have got to like have your sovereignty to your psyche and not be invaded with all of this shit.
And that
Because
is a high expression of Neptune in Aries in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
There is like a certain degree of discipline and authentication
Mhm.
and also survival. Here's the thing. Saturn going into Aries, I see a couple different manifestations and I don't know where it's going to go. Like here's the thing, like no one exactly knows where it's going to go because there's a lot of powerful shifts taking place all at the same time. And there isn't a lot of historical correlation for all of these shifts happening, certainly not in our lifetime.
Mhm.
Saturn, there is a will to survive, you know?
Definitely.
Saturn's the will and it's the perseverance and it's the like, buckling down, and Aries is the survival instinct.
Mhm.
And so the couple different ways that I see Saturn in Aries coming into play is one can be very karmic, where it's like you said, like the adult enters the room and says, all right, we got to clean this up. It's not going to be
Right.
easy, but we're going to clean up the mess a little bit here, right? And we're going to get us back on track and we are going to make changes that will make sure we survive. Okay, so that's one option. Or it is just this, Neptune triumphing with the glamorization of war and continued fighting and the austerity
Mhm.
be just so prevalent that it becomes very depressing and oppressive and a bit of a police state where, the slippery slope that we're sliding into of authoritarianism accelerates.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand what foments that, though, which is like people coming out of the Piscean state where they've just been put into a goo, the sense of self. And then if they don't, like when I say that zero Aries point, which is the big like wake up call, the snap to of okay, you've had this journey through all these realms, these Piscean realms of this experience, that now, like, okay, now, like, put skin in the game. What are you going to show for it? What are you going to put forth? And in that Aries sense, what are you going to pioneer and be a front runner of, right?
This
So
is such a pioneering time. I mean, if you think about Uranus is going to go into Gemini in the summer, which is incredibly like breaking new ground.
well, also it'll be in this awesome aspect with Pluto for a long run. So that to me, I see it as a kind of a payoff for a lot of the shit we've been through, ever since, MAGA got a foothold. And it's not just MAGA, it's all over the globe. Xenophobia and bigotry and racism about the great other, that's invading our country. I think that'll be a cleanup uh, transit, the Uranus and Pluto and that great air trine. So it's like the intelligence and the intellect come back up online in service of that transformative energy that Pluto and Uranus are about. So I think writing, what we're going to see in writing and how people are expressing themselves and communicating in new ways. I hope it's not all AI related, or as you know, A1, is released. Can you tell that story on this
So
cast?
I won't divulge my client, but in my PR world, someone was at a conference and they saw the education secretary talking about AI in schools, and she kept referring to it as A1 because she literally didn't even understand that it's called AI. And that's who's leading us. Just so
Well,
just
she might have stock in A1, the steak sauce.
also
So
so my client was like, "Oh my God, you have to do something." So as a PR person, I know all of the press. And so I just started like emailing the press and being like, "Look at this video, look at this video, look what she said, look what she said." And it just spread like wildfire. And then A1 steak sauce came out today with a like a tweet or something that said, "You heard her. Steak sauce in the
you didn't
classroom."
tell me that part of it. Are you serious?
I get very proud when I am part of the cultural.
Oh, the zeitgeist burping up. Well, when I was on Reddit this morning, it was everywhere.
I
The
love that. Oh, that makes
A1.
me happy.
All the boys on Reddit were just like spinning off on this. It was great.
So if you haven't seen it, just Google Linda McMahon A1, and then you can throw a
She's
blue
so
heart down there
earnest.
for me to say thank you, because that was me and my client.
And bravo,
Thank
bravo.
you. All
More
the
love.
little things that we can do. I mean, I have to delete this video down there, but I actually did ask ChatGPT if I should be concerned, and they were like, "Yeah, I know you're really excited about your 8,000 followers, but you're really not. It's not that big of a deal. Like you're not on the government's radar." So I felt a little good about that.
So you seriously got on Chat GPT to ask if, well, no, I don't say that derisively. Like, were you, because I am learning as Luddite as I am. I have all of these friends, and some of them astrologers, tarotists, artists that are, they're just into the AI,
I'm
where
not
they're
into
paying,
the AI, but here's the deal.
well,
It
no,
is
what I mean,
a job.
no, what I'm saying is people don't realize there's a like light years of difference between like Chat GPT and then paying for language models from like Google's Gemini or something. The one's sort of like a little parlor game, say Chat GPT, it's free, people are,
Yeah.
but when you're hardcore and going into like, the upper levels of Gemini or Perplexity and all that, that is a whole other world.
I have not experimented with that world because I'm not a fan, but I also realize that, this is Pluto and Aquarius, like the world is changing. Things are not going to be as I know them. I don't know what that foretells. But yes, I did. I do think that you can get better information sometimes from Chat GPT than Google. And so I was just kind of messing around, and I was like, should I be more careful, and it wrote some disclaimer language for me. um Not that it'll matter eventually if that's what they decide to do. So
Well, I'm
and
not,
right now
I'm
they're
just,
trying to scare people, and that's part of the Neptune and Aries too.
yeah,
Is the fear is like a level 10 for so many people.
but I think the more interesting part of what you're talking about is just how it's become part of our life now to just go ahead and access AI, for whatever.
Yeah.
And see, what I tell clients is that the beauty of the Pluto and Aquarius, there is, of course, all this shadow about tech and AI and robots and, androids and everything that connotes. But what it does do is clear the way for artists and for people, for whatever they're working on creatively. I see it as it will have a great impact on, people who are making and doing individual things. I don't know, again, whatever, painting, a book, a garden, a symphony, a new way of teaching. That'll be the beautiful part of Pluto, Aquarius, with this set of transits in Aries, is that I think there'll be a hunger for people doing things that aren't mass, related, mass, internet related, social media related, people doing individual things and reconnecting with other individuals.
Yeah,
So
and highlighting their uniqueness in a
exactly.
way that, I did see something about like the fall of influencers and things like that, which good, right? Like Neptune in Pisces, very influencer. That was the rise of the influencer. And it was very toxic for everybody involved, including those influencers, right?
Absolutely. Did you see that HBO special on, she was some kind of a family mommy blogger. I think she was
Oh,
Mormon.
I know the story, but I didn't watch.
Whoa.
That would be good.
Well, I just bring it up not to harp on it, but I thought, oh, right. Saturn and Neptune are leaving Pisces. So here, this is they're pulling the dregs up now and we're seeing it.
Why don't you tell this a little bit of the story? Because
Well,
you
it
said
was a
that's a little
woman,
creepy.
just, like a lot of people on YouTube. She thought it would be fun to film her family, her husband and three kids, cooking dinner, doing Christmas. Anyway, it just snowballed. It became gigantic, this show. And then, of course, the checks started coming in from Google, YouTube, because of viewership. And then it suddenly took over their entire lives, the
Right.
channel, and the kids' psychology was being destroyed because she's like, "Get up, we've got to film," and the kid's like, "I don't want to." Yeah, anyway, and then it just spiraled into this madness where suddenly she had the kids locked up in closets, their feet taped to their hands, they hadn't eaten, and
Oh my God.
it just, I mean, it went so dark, Dabney. Of course, all my Scorpio was completely hooked into it because
You,
I was like,
got to eat
wow.
caffeine. I'm in.
Like,
I'm gonna watch it.
well, I just mean because with all the influencer stuff, I'm always like, God, what is the shadow material of this person or this family or this channel? Or like, look at Mr. Beast now. Do you know who he is? He's like all exploding out about the tariffs and the destruction of everything. And now he's going to open his own Disneyland. There's an Aries Neptune thing for you.
All right. Yeah, no, it's funny. I tried to have a travel blog once. It was called This Boho Life, and this is my experience with this. I
You mean vlogging, video?
no, no,
Oh,
this is a blog, but so a little different, but just I did it for like a Sunday afternoon and I was like, I hate this. And like I never published it. I was like, what am I doing? Like that's going to take me out of my trips. Like I love traveling. Like
exactly.
just the idea of like photographing myself or my family and like documenting everywhere we went and like I was just like, "Oh my God, I hate this." Like but there was this part of me that like felt like I should be doing something like that, right?
Hmm.
So literally,
Hmm.
like my family laughs at me that like I had a travel blog for 3 hours, and then I was like, oh yeah, I don't. That's not gonna. I
Yeah,
don't
I
think
can't imagine.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but now I have a YouTube channel where you can purchase my course. Sign up below.
Well,
But
tell me a little bit about the course, and then the listener will hear
oh,
too. Because
well,
no,
my
really.
course is just a beginner foundation course, so you can read your own chart. Because I do feel like so many people on YouTube are like all 12 signs, and it's not, you're a professional astrologer, that like there might be some truth to that, but like listen for your sun sign and your rising sign and your moon. Like that's not really accurate. Like where does this eclipse or where does Pluto fall in transit in your chart?
Hmm.
Very different. You can't just say because you might have a house interception or, there's a lot of different ways. Like I often, if I'm listening to one of those things, I listen for Capricorn rising because I'm 28 Sag rising. So, like, so anyway, the point being, I feel like people don't understand astrology, and most people who teach astrology are astrologers, and they talk astro speak, and they talk about the ingress and the cazimi and the this and the that, because that's the world we live in. And sometimes I think people are just showing off, frankly. And like, I don't think that's helpful for people who are non-astrologers who need someone to really break it down for them. So that's what the
Mm.
course is. But I was just kidding when I brought my course up.
No, I think it's great. And I really support that approach because I do think there's a lot of highfalutin nonsense that gets, like I don't know if you saw that post I did on the newsletter in my Substack where some gal had put up a chart with the 10 planets and lights were there, but then like 15 like
I did
asteroids.
watch that.
And I was like, what? This is madness. And then I can't imagine
You
being a
called it like
student.
you said, this isn't a chart. This is a mental illness or something, or a neurosis or something. It cracked me up.
I did, but I think because you're a Cancer as well, right? See, we both have the same kind of a focus on the attention of the student or the child or the
Right.
the
The one we're trying
novice.
to nurture and help.
Exactly. And so stuff like that, I can't imagine like if I was someone coming on to that chart and interested in astrology, I'd be like, forget this shit. Like, I mean, a chart alone just with 10 lights and planets is intimidating. But
Right.
anyway, you get my point. Like, I think your approach with your class, I think is fantastic. Just the basics, get it, and
Most
escape.
people don't like have that gene. Most people don't have the astrologer gene, because if they did, they would have found it. Like they would have done it already, but I think everyone can benefit from it. Like you
Yeah.
can really benefit from knowing what's happening in your chart or what your life is all about. But if we don't make it accessible to everybody, then they don't get that gift. And that was
Exactly. Yeah.
so yeah. But thank you for asking me. That was very cool.
Sure.
He's such a Cancer. He care of me, help me sell a couple courses. No,
Get
I
them, people.
I
Get
do
them
appreciate it.
today.
So yes, okay, so Saturn, Neptune, what are you looking forward to, or what are you driving, or do you have a sense of this going in one direction or the other, or are you like, I'm just like with everybody else along for the ride?
Well, there, no doubt, the latter part of the equation, there's no escaping that unless I drop dead tomorrow. So
Which
I'm
you're
here.
not gonna.
Well, who knows? My God, everything's a crapshoot nowadays. I think I well, first of all, I mean, this is so subjective. I am real partial to Aries people, or let's say Aries, the organic function of Aries. I think Stephen Arroyo was saying people really don't appreciate enough the mental brilliance of Aries people. They just are pulling things in. Like they have some antenna that's up and it is pulling in from places that aren't quite like within the normal flow of time. And that's how you have like an Edison as who was an Aries, inventing and bring, all of this crazy stuff that he would tune in on. Of course, he stole a lot from other inventors, which is another very Aries way to do it too, kind of martially move in and claim something that's not yours. But anyway, my point is I'm excited for coming out of the Piscean murk. Nothing against Pisces, the beauty of that sign, the blendedness, everything's one, we're all together in this puppy pile. I'm ready for this individualistic popping of creative minds now. And I'm just going to think of them as ballet dancers, like coming out on point and going shooting across the stage.
I love that.
But on the other hand, I think the human nature's love, as James Hillman called it, the love of war, is probably the more intimidating part of the process, the more alarming part, and I'm also kind of braced for that as well. I mean, first of all, regardless of the astrology, I mean, since cavemen and women came out of caves, people are always fighting with each other. I mean, it's just it's a idol that people have that there will be peace in the kingdom of earth for all time. And I don't think we're living in an age like that. So I think we're still prone to our xenophobic shortcomings and things like that. So also, you know this, when the economy gets funky, war is often what snaps everything out of it and back into place, right?
Yes and no. I think so. If I had a crystal ball or just my intuition about what's going to happen, which we'll see, right? My intuition is that there is a lot of this is a lot of the things about he who shall not be named and what he's doing is a catalyst to moving us into the future. Now, I do believe that I still have faith in the American populace, not for their intelligence per se, but for their pioneering spirit and
Hmm.
their um, their ability to reinvent themselves. And I think there is kind of a dissolution. I think there is a falling apart of the empire, but I think there is this kind of like pioneering perseverance that reinvents itself in the coming years. And it will not be what it was ever again. We would, but maybe what it was broken. And, it felt more comfortable and better than what is happening now and what we will go through. But that is my crystal ball prediction. I do predict some people are going to go through some really people are already going through like hard times. So let's not like there are people who are already terrified that they're going to lose their homes or they're going to be deported or like it's already happening, the hard times. But talking about the hard times meaning like once it starts to move up the chain, right? We've got Bill Ackman like whining on Twitter because he's losing parts of his billions of dollars, right? Until he suddenly was like tipped off to buy the stock market and then he said art of the deal. But I digress on that one. The reality is if we look at the collective, I do believe in a few years we will come out of this in a different way and be healthier for it. I don't know how much longer. I actually don't think we're going to fall into an authoritarian state. Do I think that we are in one right now? Actually, I do. But I think something is going to change because there is so much shift coming, there's some accountability coming.
Mm.
I'm just being optimistic, but I just don't see us putting up with that for that long. Like it'll happen, but for how long are we going to put up with it knowing who Americans are and how much they do not like to be told what to do or they do not like discomfort. And we will not be under this Pisces death cult delusion in the same way we have been, like, let's say around COVID. So
Well, okay, well, a lot of interesting points there. Uh, and I like the optimism of it. Um, I think something you mentioned earlier, and I had mentioned this to Jessica when we talked the other day, was that the Saturn Neptune conjunction coming up in Aries is right on the nadir of the US's birth chart, right? Now, I see the fourth house of the chart as like a death zone. Of course, there's the traditional eighth house association with death. But if you really look at the cycles as they move around the wheel of the chart, from the midheaven, the high point at noon, and then the sun, moving down to, hitting the nadir, which is the midnight point, that is like the death or the end point. So Saturn, which has to do with time and our nuts and bolts reality, in this conjunction with Neptune at the nadir of the US chart, it is like a kind of veneration or worship of death throes of the country. That is it, even if it's not up in people's minds, even if it's not up in MAGA-ville mind, it is something, I think, for the collective of the country that's happening. It's like we're all celebrating in some weird, twisted way the end of this particular American saga or narrative. And then, of course, with any cycle, then there's a renewal and rebirth and all of that to come. But I think for people hoping for some sudden like shift in their lifetime right now, I just don't know if that is could happen so quickly through this phase right now. But then look at Russia during, the last Saturn Neptune conjunction. The wall was down, communism was completely like, reworked or reframed or released. So it could happen that quick. But I think the US is in kind of like Chris Hedges said the other day when he was evaluating what happened after the election and the fact that the Republicans had won, his take was that, well, the country now is really divided into a corporatocracy, which the Democrats represented, or an oligarchy, which the
Well,
GOP represented.
mhm.
So if Kamala had
Perceived, let's
won,
say they perceived that, because it's not fair to like, because it wasn't the Democrats versus the Republicans, it's both of them, because that
well,
it isn't the left right, it's the bottom versus
it,
the, it just
yes, and ideally he was saying it would have been mellower and a bit easier going if Kamala Harris had won, the Democrats held power, and then the corporatocracy could do its thing. And as Democrats do, they give a few crumbs here and there to the disenfranchised and people that need the social safety nets. But the big money, the corporations, all the blah blah that we bitch about, all that's in place still. It's wilder though now, I think, and this is that Aryan vibe again, this sort of militaristic or authoritative or whatever, the oligarchical vibe that's there is, as we're seeing, it's going to be harsher for people to adjust to.
so you just you talked about like the ending of communism, and we all had this kind of very optimistic take on like, oh my gosh, that's so great, the wall's coming down. I mean, I was a kid and I would remember like I went bought a piece of the like Berlin Wall for history, because America, we like to buy things, right? Like that's what we are taught, right? And look what happened, right? Like, was there improvement? There was improvement in some people's lives, but there was a big oligarchy takeover. That's what ended up
Exactly.
happening. And so do I think that could happen here? Absolutely, I do. But do I think that it will happen differently? Absolutely, because I think we have very different karma. And I think Ukraine has different karma than, say, Belarus, right? Like
Mhm.
each of these countries has their own historical vibe. We are a country that was settled by a bunch of religious cult, like, fanatics.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I look at our country and think about like the different regions and who settled the different regions and the immigrants that came from it, and that's how we end up with this very different patchwork of cultures,
Hmm.
very different. Like the Puritans are not the same as the people that settled in, Jamestown. And they're not the people from the Eastern European nations that settled in Kentucky. Like, so, and then the people that came to California for the gold rush, right? Like, so it's like Europe a little bit more. We're a little
Hmm.
bit more like we have these different cultures, but we say we're the United States, even though we are not, in fact, the United States.
Yeah, I to your point and going a little bit jumping ahead, I would say, and this is something I kind of parrot over and over with clients, is that um because everyone's in their own way kind of having anxiety or freaking out about this or that with what's happening. I think, I think even MAGA people, even though they're like, yay, yay, we won, I think they're kind of disoriented. And I didn't really buy in for that part of it where they're shutting my farm down or whatever. But I just keep telling people it sounds idiotic, but go out and start connecting with other people.
It's not idiotic.
Go, start making human contact. Get off the fucking internet and social media because we're so inculcated into it now. And go out and start mingling, get together with and then of course COVID was a whole other nightmare, disconnected everybody again. Get get out, go out, meet people, get together, go to dances, go to clubs, go to classes, get with people because that is, well, first of all, it's a very Aries thing to like want to go out and seek and find something new, right? And of course, Aries is opposite Libra, so it's that whole dynamism of human relations. So I think to your point, about Americans and what makes them unique. And remember, in the US chart, there's that great trine between Saturn and Uranus in the US chart. So it does know how to work with revolution and upset and sudden occurrences. So maybe things can turn quickly and get, put into like a healthier framework. But I just don't see it being very easy through this term that we're in,
Well, the
unless,
only thing that's giving me a little optimism is the the positive aspects with the outer planets in the summer. It's the only thing that's giving me a little like, maybe we are going to turn some things around. Now, if we don't turn some things around when things all go back into Pisces in the fall before 2026,
mhm,
this is the pivotal year where like we're getting a hint of like this is actually what you wanted. This is, and also we've become so fat and lazy, spoiled and entitled. Now, that's not all of us, okay? So I'm not talking, but I'm talking as a culture. Like there is kind of this sense of entitlement from becoming the leader of the world, right? You get this sort of sense of superiority, and that's never healthy. I always say to my son, spoiled people are not happy people.
mhm,
And I think we're spoiled. I do. And that is a very weird thing to say when it's like, my other friend said we're living in the Hunger Games, where like I went and saw someone speak the other night and like I had to step over a homeless person and his dog. And like my heart breaks because that should not be that way in the wealthiest nation in the world. And so something is broken. It's severely broken when people cannot go to the doctor, they are bankrupt, they are working multiple jobs. So I am trying to embrace the fact that these changes are what you said with Jessica. It's like on this unconscious, I think that the collective unconscious brings apart the dissolution when it's needed because you're so unhappy. There is this self-destructive nature that will then give you the opportunity to hit rock bottom and then rebuild. And that's what I'm equating it to. So do I think
mhm.
that we're in for easy street? I do not. I think that things are going to get hard. But I think that those are the times that then people become, I think there's a lot more opportunity for people individually and spiritually and on a deeper level to grow and not just be miserable sitting at their homes trolling other people because they are unhappy with their own lives.
Right. Or doom scrolling or reading another piece on Kim Kardashian or
Right.
something where,
Right. Something more
right. So,
meaningful, because I think there's a crisis of meaning. I think there's a crisis of that individuation, like you said. And that's where all of these planets, when you have, now there's can be something somewhat dehumanizing about Pluto and Aquarius and Neptune and Saturn and Aries and Gemini, Uranus and Gemini. None of those are particularly touchy-feely, humanizing signs, right? But we did really see Neptune and Pisces, which had so much potential, and like the born, like, I mean, how many people talk about, The Secret and like manifestation and stuff. And like it, there has to be something grounded in reality, and we have to come out of the delusion, and we have to recognize that we are not going to ever be Kim Kardashian, and Kim Kardashian is actually quite miserable.
at least I hope she is.
No,
Um,
it is. Like, she's trapped too. I think everybody's
but
trapped. And that's why people did this. This is why I think people did this. So, this is the first time I've actually been very passionate. So, Frederick, I don't know what I'm going to do with this video, how I'm going to edit it, but like, this is the first time I'm really being passionate and saying exactly what I think is going to happen and why I think it happened. But it's not sugar coated, but it is hopefully optimistic from a spiritual standpoint.
okay, well, God, I'm honored that I could help catalyze that by coming on.
But I mean, well, now you tell me, did that make any sense, or am I just smoking something?
No, I think
Who
I
knows what
think
I
it.
know? I just get worked up sometimes.
Well, no, I think it's important that those points get people remember those points about our humanity and the situation we're in, and that probably it's not going to be an easy pass. But the great thing about Saturn in the equation is, you get what you pay for. You put in the work, you get the benefits of it, you get the satisfaction, it's like going to the gym, you work out, you get the benefits of it. Might not be fun initially getting in there, but again, my thing to people is get get outside, get together with people, start the front runners of the Uranus Pluto trine, where the intellect and conversation and talking and thinking is inspiring, and that social instinct is critical for people. There's survival instinct, sexual instinct, and the social instinct. If we're like all becoming incel versions in some way because we're cut off, it doesn't bode well for mental health and stuff. And then with MAGA in again, it's like a double dose of fuckery that people are, think about it, because when Trump won in 16, we all got sort of trained for that kind of behavior. Then we went into detox with Biden. And then you know how detox is, some people some people get through it, right? But some people go back to drinking or smoking, and now we're back into the bad MAGA habits again with
Damn
the.
relapsers, man.
Well, yeah, so don't be a relapser. Just, okay, it's happening. I'll check the news a couple times a day, but just don't mainline this stuff.
Well, Saturn and Aries is, whether people like it or not, it is going to be hardcore rehab.
Hmm.
Like, that's it. It just will
Hmm.
be. No matter what ends up happening, as far as
Hmm.
which direction, how much is the high road of this energy or the low road, it'll probably be somewhere in between. It'll be a
Yeah, so yeah, and look at your chart. Each person, look at where Saturn and Aries is doing its thing, and put your stake down there. You know, put it in the ground and go, okay, I'm going to make something unique here. It's going to be hard work, Saturn, but it's going to be original, Aries, and fiery, which is generally fun. I don't buy into all this stuff like Aries is in its fall or Saturn's in its fall,
either.
Aries, and how is the sun in its fall in Libra? Like the sun, like, anyway, I'm not into all the thing with dignities
We're
and
not
stuff.
traditional astrologers.
I'm
We're
not,
more
no,
modern.
I'm not. So if people have that feeling about it, I say let it go, you know.
I agree. Because I think Saturn is much more like debilitated in Pisces than it is in Aries, like just from an intuitive standpoint. Now, that doesn't mean that that's what, the ancient traditional astrologers felt. So, but I don't like those two energies together because they're so contradictory. And I feel like Saturn has been miserable in Pisces.
Well, right, unless a person has a proclivity for like I don't know, remember that movement in art that was called Dada?
Mm-hmm.
It was all kind of cacophonous and chaotic. That's a Saturn and Pisces vibe. And that was a great art movement. It really shook things up. But it is that weird mishmash of things that this doesn't go with that. And this seems weird, you know. So the clarity, I think, of Saturn and Aries is going to be brisk and really exciting, ultimately, right?
Awesome. Well, I think that's a good place to end it.
Yes, because I'm going to eat now. My Cancerian calling for lunch. I'm kidding.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I know that we were a little bit all over the place, but
Oh,
I actually,
that's my kind of video. I don't like stuff all, so it was great. I hope that your
I like that you
listeners
make me
enjoyed it.
laugh and you make me think.
Well,
So,
thank you. Same
yeah,
here.
great commentary on Frederick's newsletter. So again, I will put that below. It's definitely worth a subscribe, and I'm a premium subscriber.
Right on. Thank you for that support too. I
Uh,
appreciate that. And good
you're
seeing you, Dabney. Loved connecting again.
Yeah. So hopefully you'll come on again. And
I will.
as always, there is a reason and a season for it all, stargazers. I hope I didn't get too worked up and excited about my crystal ball. But everybody, till next
See you guys,
time.
gals. Bye-bye.